All right, guys, I'm back with part two. So this is going to be about the economy between the wars and what's happening there. So important changes took place in the 20 years between the world wars, from 1919 to 1939. We're going to talk about what those were and how that affected and how that kind of brought us into World War II, even. So in Europe, the war led to a sense of bitterness and pessimism among nations. As we said before, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because we just talked about it. Many European nations were destroyed and bankrupted by years of fighting along the Western Front. Um, so they're all out of money. Russia was destroyed after World War One, and then there was a 3-year civil war that led to communism and the formation of the Soviet Union, something that we'll get back to later. Um, and the harshness of the Treaty of Versailles created bitterness in Germany, who were unable to pay reparations. Um, so, as, so the Germany's really bitter about how harsh the treaty was on them. They can't pay reparations to Britain and France because they don't have any money either. That's causing huge problems for them, and hurting their economy and all sorts of things. Italians were angry because they didn't receive land along the Adriatic coast that they were promised for for switching sides during the war. Remember, they switched sides during World War One so that they could gain land from Austria-Hungary. That didn't happen. So then the Italians are angry as well. So that causes problems there. Uh, so while European nations struggled to rebuild and pay for the war, some world nations actually benefited from World War One, and those are mainly the United States and Japan. Japan gained wealth by selling supplies to the Allies, and it increased its position as the strongest nation in Asia during World War One. Japan becomes very, very powerful then, and the United States was the wealthiest nation in the world, and it was a major world power that created but never joined the League of Nations. The World War One actually makes the United States more wealthy, and so does after the war. It just compounds that. Um, because World War One, we made a lot of money selling things to the Allies um, and loaning money. We loaned a lot of money, and then we loaned a lot of money after World War One too, and that's and obviously get interest on that. It really it really helps us out. So the United States used its wealth to help European nations repay their debts and rebuild after the war. And again, these are loans, so the United States gets interest on them. Um, so what happens is the United States loans money to Germany. Germany uses that money to pay its reparations to Britain and France, and then Britain and France repay their war loans back to the United States. So it's just the money's going in circles and just and helping everybody out. Um, so the United States is able to use their wealth in order to help out the Europeans as much as as much as possible. Um, the and then the circle continues, right? The United States has even more money. It loans more money to Germany. Germany uses that money to pay its reparations, and then Britain and France repay their war loans. Now, that just means that Germany's going to be the one in debt to the United States instead of Britain and France. So this causes a boom in the United States in the 1920s, and that's called the Roaring Twenties in the United States. And the Roaring Twenties came to an end in 1929 when the stock market crash, bank failures, and high unemployment led to a Great Depression. So there's several different reasons for this, but um, but this high that the United States was on after World War One comes crashing down in 1929. You can see there the price index of stock prices drops significantly every year for quite a few years, and ends up being lower than it was at the beginning of the 1920s. Um, bank failures increased exponentially over the next few years. Business failures increased for a long time as well. Everyone was running out of money. There's a high amount of unemployment. Um, about uh, about 13 million people were were unemployed in the United States at the height of the Great Depression. Terrible. It hits the United States terribly during this time. But then the Depression in America triggered a worldwide depression in the 1930s because international trade declines and that U.S. investment in Europe ended because the United States didn't have the cash flow anymore to do that. So we're not investing in Europe anymore. That hurts Europe. The international trade declined because the United States wasn't able to be involved in that trade as much because people weren't buying as much stuff. Um, so this depression in the United States ends up spreading to all these other countries very quickly, actually. Um, so you see you see imports and exports drop significantly, and these are in billions of dollars over the next few years. The depression led to a sharp rise in unemployment in Europe, where where unemployment increases by by huge amounts as far as how many as the percentage of the workforce that's unemployed. It's just in just a couple of years it goes from about under 5%, maybe 4% to 25% in the United States. It goes up to 30% in Germany before it comes back down. Spikes up to around 25% in Great Britain as well, which the 25% of your workforce out of work, that's a huge deal, and and hurts the economy a lot. Um, in Germany, the situation grew desperate by the 1930s, and the Weimar government, the government that had signed the Treaty of Versailles in Germany, became more unpopular. The Weimar Republic was already unpopular because government leaders had signed the Treaty of Versailles. But then, as the situation grew more desperate, now the government's becoming even more unpopular. To pay war reparations and rebuild the country, the government printed money, which led to hyperinflation. And this is always not a good idea. The reason you can't just print all your own money is because then that money becomes less, it becomes worth less. So, the more money you print, the less money it's worth, and that leads to a bunch of inflation. So much so that in this picture you can see that that these kids are playing with blocks of with essentially wads of bills. They're using them as like blocks to build things. I don't think I have this picture in here, but there's a picture of people throwing money into a fire because it was literally the bills were so worthless that it was that it it was cheaper to throw money into the fire and use it as kindling for the fire than it was to buy firewood. So, so this essentially this paper was meaningless because it would it didn't it didn't do you anything. It didn't give you anything because so much money had been printed to try to repay these debts. Unemployment in Germany reached 30%. And like Germany, Italians felt betrayed by the treaty. They had a suffering economy. They saw their unemployment rise as well. So, due to this economic depression, bitterness about the Treaty of Versailles and the war, and the desperation happening in Europe due to all these things combined, powerful dictators would seize power in Germany and in Italy, and these dictators played a very important role in causing World War II, as we'll see later. All right. So that's what's happening between the wars, and I did great. We got some good. We made good time there. So y'all should be good to go on that. Let me know if you need anything, but y'all should have your pieces chart finished and turn that in. Y'all have a good day.